This episode is brought to you by our newly established Patreon. Look, if this podcast has been beneficial to you or someone you know at any point, or you simply just have a few extra dollars that you don't know what to do with, we invite you in to join our Patreon for as low as $1 a month. Look, every single dollar right now is literally going towards an amazing cause. That is not code for give us some money so that we can put it into our pockets and figure out what to do with it later. No, seriously, assuming that all of our equipment is not going to just break overnight, literally all of the money right now is going towards helping us give money to first-generation BIPOC college students to help purchase their textbooks each semester. As both John Mark and I hold several jobs in the college space and university settings, this cause is just really, really very aligned with our heart for the podcast. Although we are starting small, we really believe that the importance of generational change and education is a perfect way to launch this Patreon and this endeavor. So, look, if this is something you are down with, please go over to patreon.com/racially speaking right now to join that community.
Life in 3 dimensions got me bent and got me twisted. I know I done said a lot, but I should probably stop pretending. I don't really hold the key and I can't really push a button. I just step up to the mic and try my very best to bust it, but I ran out of breath. It's tight in my chest. My feet just might fail. I can't stand the pressure.
All right, you guys, this next part, let's talk about one of our favorite artists in the music scene, Mr. Lecrea. We've talked about him off and on, I think, since we've been doing this podcast. John Mark, I think maybe even a little bit in the past. Leith, he just put out his, I don't know what number album this is for him, but 4th in this series, 4th and final, Church Close 4. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit. So to set us up a little bit, I think talking about Lecrea and specifically him, because I think he's kind of just the face of whatever he's the face of. Christian hip-hop. I know he probably wouldn't even like that title, but
hip-hop. Christian hip-hop rapper. Yeah. You can't, I feel like you can't even, you can't shed that because you don't give it to yourself, but you know, he's the number one.
He would not identify himself as that.
Exactly.
No, he wouldn't. He wants to shed that label, but it's really hard.
For the purposes of this conversation, I'll label him as that for a second, and then we'll dive in, and you'll see why we don't personally view him as that. But the nature of this podcast, how it intersects faith, family, vocation, and everything in between. I think he's an important person, one of the most important people to be faithful to discuss on here. I think perception of his music, of him as a person, of what he discusses, even not in his music, is really important and says a lot about where we're at collectively as Christians and then as people. And there's so much. Anyway, he just put this album out last week, I believe, right around the same time as Black Panther. I don't even think it's been 2 weeks. I've listened to it several times. Always a big Lecrea fan. Is he down in Atlanta? Anyway, Leith.
Yeah, he's here in Atlanta.
I'm just going to go out on a limb. You had to have met him. I feel like you know a lot of people. Have you met him before?
I do know some people, and it's funny who you could also run into here in Atlanta. I've seen Andy Mineo a couple of times, just at coffee shops, but I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be that weird fan that interrupts him, so I'm just not going to say anything. but yeah, so we have some mutual friends, and I was at my friend's house, and we were just chilling, and this Tesla pulls up, and I was like, oh, who else is coming over? I didn't know. And here comes Lecrea and his wife just walking down the driveway. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. Don't be weird. Don't be weird. Because I've been rocking with Lecrea since 2009 when I heard The King, right? That was the single that dropped that people were like, what is Christian rap? What is this? Now granted, there were people that came before Lecrea, but he was the one that kind of broke through, and the conversation really kind of went outside some of the Christian, quote, Christian rap bubbles. And so for me, I was like, don't be weird, because I've been a fan for like, 13 years now. Yeah. And so, and he's so easy to talk to, super chill, down to earth, kind. So it was, awesome. I got through my, like, I fangirled internally, but I was like, hey, Lecrea, I'm Alethea, nice to meet you.
Nice.
So cool. Good
so you did it.
Your music's amazing.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You accomplished Don't Be Weird.
I did. Yeah. I was really proud of myself. Yeah. I was. I have friends that are in the spotlight, and so I see what happens to them. And so I don't want to be like that person, Mm-hmm. So I have to. I've had a few moments where I'm like, okay, just don't be weird. Don't be weird. Don't be that person. So
that's awesome.
I know for a fact I couldn't have done that. Not that I got as much notice as you got with seeing him pull up in his car, but quick story, side tangent. I was at the Four Seasons Hotel shooting a wedding. Me and Caitlin photograph weddings, and I was standing in the hallway waiting to get in the room where the bride was. And I was kind of leaning up against a hotel door, normal looking hotel hallway, and the door opens. I hear a voice say, "Oh, excuse me." I was like, oh, "Okay," and I am turning around. No one can see me, but no one can see me on this recording right now. But I'm turning around and I'm like, oh, yeah, sorry. And I start to look up. I'm 5'8", and I look up. And it's Victor Oladipo, NBA. At that point, he was an all-star. And it was so, I was like, where am I? And he clearly didn't want to be noticed. He had sunglasses on and, everything. Yeah. And I probably sounded like a 10-year-old. I was like, oh my God, you're Victor Oladipo. And was just like deer in the headlights. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. No, that's awesome. No be cool with me at all. I was like, oh my God. And
let me be clear. I have definitely been that person. Mm-hmm. Just really quick, we're in these side tangents.
Yeah.
When I met Truth's Table, Akimini, and Dr. Christina, I fangirled. I was so weird. I was amazing. I saw there was they were speaking at a conference here in Atlanta, and I was so excited. Like, I want to meet them. I posted about them on Instagram and Twitter at the time when I had Twitter. And someone I was with, one of my mentors, he's like, oh, I'm going to go introduce myself. So I'm standing there like, I'm telling myself, don't be weird, don't be weird, don't be weird. And then Dr. Edmondson comes over, and I'm like, you're just so amazing. I am so honored to meet you. And she's like, so kind. She's like, what's your name? And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even tell her my name.
I forget my name.
I just blanked.
You can name me. You pick a name. Pick a name for me.
So just to say, I want to be clear. I succeeded with Lecrea. I did not. Yeah. I did not with Akimini and Dr. Christina Edmondson. Just want to put that out there.
I got to meet Jamar Tisby last year, and
that's right.
I had a hard time keeping my cool. I was just glad that it was really brief. He had to run to the airport, but he looked at my name tag, and it was at this thing where you had your name and then what group you worked with or what church you worked with. He looked at my name tag, he read it, and he was like, oh, you're with. And then I was like, yep, I'm with them. And we just shared this moment of understanding.
Oh, that's good.
Who the group, because he's experienced.
Yeah,
what I'm going through. So that's hilarious.
Man,
I was like, well, at least he understood where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I love that.
I brought my books and everything to get signed. Like, I was ready. I was ready for it. So.
Amazing.
Gosh, that was a good side tangent.
It was, yeah. So running into celebrities, but back to Lecrea.
We're shooting
church close forward
level below average, but not too bad. At least Alethea played a cool one time for us.
Yeah.
Oh, John Mark, you did too. You did too, John Mark.
Only because he had to run. I don't know.
Yeah, but there's more time.
The next sentence out of my mouth would have been weird. I guarantee you. Sign my books. Weird.
So weird.
Yeah.
Is that how you sound when you're nervous? Never mind. Let's move on.
That's exactly right. Yeah, my voice goes high. Yeah.
All right, church goes forward. John Mark, you did a great job putting down a summary of this album. So, all right, let's see. This is just about one of his songs, but his song Journey tells his story of being a celebrity in evangelical circles and falling from grace in their eyes to become an undesirable. So I think that's kind of a good summary of the whole album.
Yeah.
Mostly, but the song Journey specifically does do that. And then his song Deconstruction, which is the last song on the album, I think there's 13, describes all that as well. His journey of faith and struggles to believe after his foundation was rocked because of the opposition and apathy towards racial justice that his Christian mentors demonstrated. We'll pause there. So that's in a nutshell what many of the songs are about, what the album's kind of about as a whole, what a lot of his recent music has been about. So, you know, when we set this up, Lecrea is kind of the face of quote unquote air quotes Christian rap, Christian hip hop, and now isn't not that at all, but things have for sure changed as he sings about. So I don't know, initial thoughts. Leith, since you're a close personal friend of Lecrea, what are your thoughts on what we just said?
Yeah, I think that's John Mark, that's a good summary of Church Close 4. It's for me to see the evolution of Lecrea, obviously as a person, which influences his music. And if we're going to stick just to the Church Close catalog, you know, he dropped the first one, my gosh, it was probably back in 2014 or something like that. And so it's been several years of Church Close, and you know, he drug us along for far too long to give us the fourth one. But I think even the evolution of just that catalog, the Church Close series, is I think a really incredible display of this merging of faith and hip hop. And a number of people have talked about that. I appreciate what Reach Records did in the lead up, the promo to the album was they had different people listen to different tracks, and you know, silently we couldn't hear it. And so they got headphones on, and then they said, you know, what'd you think about it? And then what have you thought about the Church Close series? And the same kind of theme was the way that Lecrea has merged faith and hip hop, and the way that he has done it in a very unique way, which has opened the door for so many other rappers to do, where they're like, man, Lecrea's done it. He's paving the way. I can do this because I've felt this, and it maybe wasn't acceptable. One of the guys that listened to one of the tracks, he said, when my grandma listened to, I forget what song it was, like a few years back, she was like, I can't believe you're listening to this trash music. And it was Lecrea or somebody, you know, and he was like, all right. And he was wanting to be a rapper. And he's like, now I'm rapping, and she's like all about it, you know? And so that, and so I just think it's really cool to see what Lecrea has done. But yeah, the album is fire. Like it's cool to think about the first Church Close and then to look at the fourth one. And there's good in all of them, but man, this culmination, I think, of his journey over the last several years, you know, he refers back in Deconstruction to 2014, 2014, 2015. So the last, you know, 7 to 8 years, you're seeing this evolution and this, Lecrea trying to find himself, and where does he fit with this, how he was raised on hip hop, growing up in Houston, Texas, moving to Atlanta, living out his faith in these evangelical contexts, white evangelical in particular, and then really having this wrestling of like, wait a second, I don't understand why y'all got a beef with this. This is a problem. Like, shouldn't we be talking about this? And so it's a very authentic, it's very real. And he's so gifted too, right? So it's all of that packaged together on display in this album. And so I already knew it's dropping at midnight. I'm finna be up late because I'm playing this thing from start to finish, and the song will help me go to sleep, you know, because it's hip hop, it's rap, but I'm gonna listen to it, right? And listen to it the next morning. So I've listened. When I get in the car, I'm like, CC4, there we go.
Nice.
And there's so much love about it. So sorry, you said initial thoughts. Those are my initial thoughts.
No, it's great. It's great. John Mark, you got anything to add right there?
Not much. I mean, I think what you said is good. The last two songs, just really his journey and the journey and deconstruction. Those two songs really struck a chord with me. But I think the album is good. He's talented. He's a good artist. I think I've followed him. The album with the song "Facts," that one really hit me. I really like that one. So I think this. I don't know if that was one of his Church Close albums. I can't remember.
No, that was on All Things Work Together.
Yeah. So that album. That was a good album. But this one's too. I think he's doing a good job. He certainly has been at the top of his game, and I think he continues to be there. So it's good to hear. Yeah. What did you think, David?
Yeah, the same. So I wanted to even dive a little bit deeper. So I think what he is singing about. So I'm trying to look at what you had even written out for us, John Mark. So his song Deconstruction describes, so a lot of the albums, especially Deconstruction, kind of chronicles his experience in navigating white evangelical circles. So Specifically, he presses into the opposition and apathy towards racial justice. Which is something we should probably talk about on here. So specifically towards racial justice that his Christian mentors, his Christian mentors demonstrated. And so I'll just say this, and you guys know this, like this is his story, but he's writing this for us as well.
Right.
Like we resonate with so much of what he's talking about. The people he even names, and I'm not going to encourage us to sit here and throw shade at a bunch of people, but he names people specifically, and I think that matters. He named
some folks.
I think
he said Vadi Bakum.
Yeah, I want to get to that.
And that really resonated with me.
Yeah, you get to that in a second, but he I think there's purpose. It's not, I think it can be tempting for people who want to push back, which we'll get to that also, but of just looking at it as, he's being divisive and it's messed up that he's putting names in there. But if you're listening and that's your go-to reaction, I just encourage you to think bigger picture, because I'll just be honest, if that's your reaction, case in point for Lecrea, because he's putting that out there because of pain he's gone through that is unaddressed and undealt with, not on his terms, but because he hasn't had the luxury or power position to be able to do that. He's had to distance himself and endure a lot, which is what exactly what he's singing about. So I'm just going to say I'm positive he's not putting those names in there lightly. You know, that is also, I know he's big deal, driving around in a Tesla, as Leith said. It's easy to look at him as a big celebrity, which he is, but that doesn't mean that doing something like this isn't him taking a hit and knowing that. I respect him so much because I truly feel and can tell that he's doing this for people like us going through the exact same things. And when he's putting people's names out there like that, he put John Piper out there, he did. Yeah, I mean, Vadi Bakum. I'm trying to look at I had it pulled up.
Judah Smith.
I've lost the Judah Smith. Tim Keller.
Yeah. What did he say about Keller?
He lists them. So he said
he lists them.
I would speak at churches. I would speak at churches, hang with leaders and such. Judah, Piper, and Keller. Tony Evans was clutch. So I guess he's giving a nod to Tony Evans. So he wasn't. No shade to him, but
no shade to Tony Evans. Yeah,
those are big deals, and he didn't expand a ton until he got to Vadi Bakum. But it's a big deal. It's not fun to speak about your Christian mentors who have mentored you and mean so much to you, and then other people collectively. I know you guys identify, I'm speaking from experience. It's not fun to have to be open about that, to tell your story, but I commend him for doing that. So I just wanted to shed light a little bit on that. But yeah, he gets a little more specific. Vadi Bakum was a hero of mine. Met with him plenty of times. This time when he spoke, he cut me deeper than I realized, doubled down, spoke about my pain. I was met with blame. Quote, "Shame on you, Cray, stop crying, get back to Jesus' name."
Did he say that? Is that a quote from Vadi Bakum?
So that it's in quotes.
Yeah. That's what,
So, that's a nod towards Vadi Bakum erring on the side of, stop talking about racial justice and pain, CRT, things like that.
Stick to the gospel.
Stick to the gospel. Yeah. Stop being, divisive. And him being open about how painful that is to people of color trying to speak up about our stories and injustice. So I think those are really important things to pick up on when you're reading those. But John Mark, did you want to elaborate at all? Because I know you did bring that up. You said you identified personally with that part.
So it was like he was reading my story to me. Like when I started really pursuing faith on my own, instead of just as a thing that my family did, I started listening to those guys like Piper, Keller, Bakum. And when I heard him, like Vadi Bakum is a black man in those circles. So I was encouraged to see somebody from his background. He grew up in the city, I think on the East Coast, one of the cities up here. Yeah. And so I was just encouraged to to hear him say that. Actually, I might be wrong on where he grew up, but he grew up in a city in America, right? So he's Black American. He's not Black from another country, another setting. But the way that, like, when I heard him speak and unpack the Bible and Scripture for the first time, I was like, wow, he's got a gift. I want to keep listening to him. But then it took a turn sometime in the past decade, and he is used as a Black face to communicate white opposition to racial justice from a Christian perspective.
Yeah.
He's become their boy that they pull out to put other Black people in line. And it broke my heart. It's heartbreaking to see him used that way. I'm like, stop talking about it. I wish he would stop talking about it, not because I disagree with him. Like, that's one thing. There's lots of people I disagree with, but because he's not doing what he used to do. I feel like he's focusing on this and hurting people as a result. So I feel like he's being used. So yeah, it broke my heart too when I heard him start saying the stuff he's saying. So I really resonated with that. And then on the other side, where he felt like the community that helped him grow in faith turned on him when he applied his faith, how Christ has taught us to love and care for others. When he applied that to racial justice, he felt like they turned on him. Like, I haven't really experienced that personally, but I've seen it, right? I've seen how Black and brown people are treated when they start to really speak out about this. I've seen them deplatformed, silenced, put aside, labeled as non-Christians or social justice warriors or critical race theorists, right? And I'm just like, I don't want any part of it. Like, it's currently right now, it's my job to speak about racial justice. It's my job to speak about crossing cultures. So I have the crosshairs on me from Christians who I'm supposed to be talking to, right? I haven't experienced a lot of personal pushback, but it doesn't make me want to keep living this job out, knowing that other people have been put on the front lines of this and been shot down, and have been, So, but it's good to hear Lecrea's story. Like, I'm so glad he put it out there, because now I have something that I can just click play on and be like, this is why, all these people are like the Black exodus of evangelical spaces, Black exodus, of white churches. Like, this is why people are leaving. This is why our numbers of people of color in Christian spaces and organizations are dwindling. Listen to this song and you'll know why. So, I appreciate Lecrea for that.
Yeah, you touched on so much. I think even bringing it back to what we just discussed so much extensively with Black Panther, I'll be honest with y'all. I think currently when I think of grief at a personal level, yes, I think about the things, actual death and things and people we've lost and experiences, but it's interconnected. And I think so much in my recent life, I think about this very thing he's singing about. It's jarring and it's disorienting and it's grievous to go through something like we've all been going through, whether it's, he goes into this, but it's different things for different people, but the racial kind of reckoning we've been navigating, that alone is jarring, absolutely, but it's a whole nother level when it's, when you're met with what he's talking about, with apathy and pushback from people that not just disagree with you. I can't stand when people just attribute it to a little disagreement. It's like, no. Like, you are the people who more than anybody should be in this innately with me. What's going on? Why am I the one that feels crazy for expecting that? Why am I the one that feels, whether it's explicit or not, why are all eyes on me with being the divisive one or countercultural one or social justice one, left-leaning one, whatever you want to call it. That's been, I've shed more tears over that dynamic and grieving that part of my life more than anything these last few years, and spent a lot of time grieving a certain community, even when, people want to label it something else as if I'm getting away from Jesus or my faith or gospel. It's very much the opposite. Sure, me and the Lord have had some talks, but it's leaning into him more because seeing, you know, that people aren't God. So I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's, I think he's talking about grief a lot in this album, and I appreciate that vulnerableness so much of not just his story, but he's telling the story of so many other people, and he's doing it. Yes, it's his job. He's a big celebrity, making money, making good music, but he doesn't have to do that. And he's choosing to be real. And he really, you know, also I think a lot of people listening might not realize, you know, the statistically, correct me if I'm wrong, Leith, you might know a little bit more, but statistically is it not young white people that listen to the most hip hop? Obviously, it's specifically Christian hip hop. So he's doing this and putting this out, knowing his fan base. So he knows what he's doing.
It was at some point white suburban males,
right?
So that intersection, I hit two of those. Just not the white part. Suburban male, that was me though.
What'd you say last episode? Suburban black.
I'm from the suburbs. Yeah, suburban black. So instead of Lecrea, I've been playing Taylor Swift's new album on repeat. Don't tell anyone. I don't want this. Yeah, you need to edit that part out.
Yeah, no one's gonna find out.
No, I'm proud. I'm a Swiftie and I'm proud. I want that to stay in this episode.
The safe space, but we'll break.
Well, I saw your boy. I think Jamar Tisby is a Swiftie as well.
He is.
He is. It's weird. He is. When he said that, it was like an artifacts, a cultural artifacts episode.
Yeah.
He said that, and Tyler Burns gave him a lot of grief. And I was like, okay, but hold on. Folklore is a great album. I was like, hear him out, Tyler. Hear him out. Folklore is a great album. So, yeah.
All her music sounds the same to me.
Ooh.
That's fair. Yeah. Anyway, this isn't about Taylor Swift. This is about Lecrea. But yeah, suburban males typically have been supporting hip hop and rap. But I wonder if that's still true today. I'm curious because like there's a lot of conscious rappers out there, and I don't know if
like
young
it makes
white
sense
guys want to hear conscious.
When I say it out loud,
it
makes sense on one side, but then the other side, I'm like, there's no way that can be true. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I definitely think it's true in the Christian circles. But
so that makes me curious who his fan base is.
Right.
On one hand, I felt like the album was still talking to white evangelicals, but I also feel like it's still leaning away from and leaving white evangelical spaces. So I'm really curious who Lecrea would say his album is written for. Like who he has in mind when he's writing the album.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it's that's a good. I definitely think there's definitely elements of that, not just in Deconstruction, right? Where he's, I think specifically centering white evangelicalism, but I also think how he starts off the album of, you know, he says, R.I.P. Breonna Taylor, R.I.P. to George Floyd. And then he says, like something about Walker's not his only, or Warnock's not his only choice, neither is Walker, right?
Yeah.
And
Herschel,
that there is not, that's him taking a moment to say, I'm not going to let you pigeonhole me, even not just white folks, black folks, other POC, to be like, oh, let's look at what's happening presently and say, hey, well, you're black, so you got to be either this or that. And he's going to say, I'm going to name some things. That's one of the things I appreciate in the album is Lecrea, and he hasn't been, he continues to not shy away from bringing up things that are very controversial that he knows he will take heat for. And yet he said, but I'm willing to lean into that to say, as a black man living in Georgia, I'm not going to let you pigeonhole me. And I'm going to say, okay, Raphael Warnock, he's been a pastor. He's not my only choice. Neither is this here. And so he starts off the album with that. And so that's where I think we see that even still in America, he's taking it not just the white evangelical context he had been in, but he's taking it much broader than that because he names in Still in America, he references Black Lives Matter, you know, at one point later in the song. and the stuff that they've been, taking some heat for recently. Yeah. So again, I think what he's doing is saying like, I've never fit in your box. And yes, there is some things that I'm coming out of, like deconstruction. Here's where I was 7-8 years ago. Here's what I'm coming out of. But throughout the album, it's still this, I'm not going to let you put me in the box that you think that I should be in, because I've been formed in this reformed space. Because in Misconceptions 4, he talks about the Reformation. He talks about, his mom not being able to be a Baptist. So like you see this like throughout the album, like he is, there's more that he's wanting to highlight. And again, I think it's one of the challenging things about the album, because I told people when I've said, hey, have you listened to Church Close 4? And I'm like, oh man, not yet, or something. I'm like, man, Craig was coming for next. That's what I say. One of the things I say. He's not just coming for one particular group or faith perspective, he's just, he's naming things that I think need to be named that are very polarizing and divisive in our country, yet need to be talked about. And so to still weave in his faith throughout it too. So anyways, I appreciate that. Like, I think he has to name some of those things. He has to acknowledge, like, here was my foundation for my faith, and it started to fall apart. What happened when it started to fall apart? When he says the line in Deconstruction, something to the extent of, I let a church hurt become a God wound, I think is how he phrases it.
That's good.
It is.
And I love the acknowledgement of that, because I resonate with that, of there's things I've experienced in, again, being in a white evangelical context for my job. But again, and I have variations of my formation in a faith standpoint of being around Black Baptists, traditional-ish in different spaces. And then being in an organization that was predominantly white for 10 years and interacting with so many different people in the process of that. Right. So, but I can resonate with the, like, there's this church hurt, we talk about Big C church, right? God's people in all its different spaces. And then saying like, now I'm mad at God. And there is this challenge of, on a human level, to me, it makes sense and can make sense sometimes, because like, well, God's allowing with so I've heard in some Black church spaces, like, it passes through God's hands first. Right. And so there's this element of like, God has allowed certain things to happen for things that feel very mysterious and beyond what my human mind can even pretend to comprehend. But for me, let that turn into like, well, now God's the problem, not the people that are acting a certain way. They actually really aren't representing the scriptures, and they're not representing what we saw Jesus model in the Gospels. That is the problem. And again, there is this orienting experience of like, well, God's allowing this to happen. They say they're Christians or professing Jesus, so like it's all God's fault. And so I just appreciate the honesty with which Lecrea walks through that, to say, I need to name where my formation fell apart and how painful that was, and how he even says it. One of the songs, I forget which one it is now, where he says that he's gotten over the white blessing thing, like with Passion, with Louis Giglio. But he says,
that was weird.
He says, my people turned on me, which again, Black folks came for his neck. Right.
Yeah, they did. They did.
And so again, he's able to say like, man, that was painful too, but I've been able to move past that. Like, I'm not going to hold on to something that happened 2.5 years ago.
I mean,
like,
how do you respond in that? Going back to that, how do you respond in that moment? You're on camera, you're on a stage with like the Chick-fil-A guy, and
that's a whole separate episode, because
this mega pastor comes up to you and says, what did he say? I don't like to call it white privilege. I like to call it white blessing, as if God is behind it. Like, I don't know how Lecrea could respond. All I know is that who was it? It was Bernice King was supposed to be in his spot. And
no, she was supposed to be there with him. They were both supposed to be there.
Well, whatever God did to get her out of that situation, I praise God for that.
I would have loved to see her on the spot right there, though.
He should have bounced too, though, when he knew Sister Bernice wasn't coming. But again, we all make choices.
We got to go in Paris. We got to have community.
Yeah, we do, but we all make choices, and I think that's part of it. Was Lecrea should need to be. There's some accountability there, because you did show up, right? But again, I think what we see played out in the album is for him to be able to say, like, I'm not defined by that. Like, it was a miss, I should have never gone. That's what he has said, that I should have never gone, but I did go, and I heard it, but he says, I was thinking about what I was going to say next. And so it had this moment of like, he said, we have like they say, I think they just said, but like, I'm getting ready to say something else. So I don't, what's happening. And then it's happening. Right. So to be able to say like, I'm going to acknowledge that in the album. Right. But to say like my own people came for me, talking about Black folks, right. In this sense. Yeah. And so again, I think there's an authenticity about Lecrea that I've always appreciated about him, which is why I've been a fan of him from Jump, and seeing him evolve as an artist, as a person. But again, I think it's painful and it's hard that he's going to publicly acknowledge, and people can be upset. Like, why would you name people? It's like, well, they were part of his formation. And I think in highlighting that, it also shows like there were gaps in their faith. There were gaps in their theological frameworks. There were gaps in saying, I'm bringing something very painful to you where an image bearer has been killed, and you're going to tell me I just need to keep talking about Jesus. Well, what Jesus are you talking about then? Because the Jesus I'm reading about in the scriptures would care. And so anyways, I
says more about people. Says more about people with that kind of pushback than it does about Lecrea.
Yes. It sure does. Yeah, and to that point, like bringing up names, it's okay. He's not saying like Vadi Bakum is the worst man who ever lived. He's not slandering his name or bashing him. He's just saying he was a mentor of mine and then he hurt me, right? So it's okay to bring up like when somebody did something. It's okay to talk about those things. It doesn't mean we're not slandering. It's not gossip. It's just stating facts. And I appreciate that he was willing to go there, that he was willing to bring it in. I think so often, and probably too often, when there is some type of racial hurt, we protect the one who's hurt us and we don't bring it up. But if there really is forgiveness and repentance and moving forward, then, like Zacchaeus he was able to go back and say, hey, I took this money from you. Let me give it back to you, 4 times, whatever I took from you. Right. So he wasn't trying to hide his reputation. It was like, yeah, we did this. Let's move on together. And I think that's a beautiful picture if, someone like Vadi Bakum was able to come along with Lecrea and say, hey, I'm sorry I did this, So I feel like it is okay to name names when you're just telling the truth.
Yeah. And you're talking about someone like Lecrea, who is in a very influential space, right? So, and he's not only being influenced and mentored by a Piper, a Keller, a Judah Smith, other people are thousands and thousands of people. So we're not talking about you're in a small town, you go to your local church and you got a pastor, right? Like, and you're just in your small community. Like, we're talking on a very big stage where he's highlighting like there became a point where it was incomplete. And I didn't know it was incomplete until this moment happened. And I was disoriented by it being incomplete because I didn't think it was. And now I don't know what to do. And now I'm being made the problem. So he's talking about deconstruction. I was made the problem, not their incomplete theology, not their incomplete gospel, because they've been put up on a pedestal, right? Because they're these influential theologians who know everything, because the Western world has been the heartbeat of theology, and the West knows everything. That's what we're talking about. And so you start saying, hey, like there's a gap here, and people don't want to deal with their own stuff to say, don't tell me the person that I've been influenced by too has a gap, it's incomplete. Don't do that. I'm going to make you the problem. And so again, I think it's important because of the space that Lecrea occupies. There is a stewardship and a responsibility that comes with that space to say, this is what I navigated. Here's where it became troubling and hard and difficult. And I'm going to continue to evolve, which means I'm going to move away from that space. You guys might come with me, but I'm going to expand my understanding of who God is and what it means for me to be a Black man in America who loves Jesus, who wants to live out their faith in this really unique way. And that means I'm never going to fit into the box that you had me in that I didn't even know I was in, but you're telling me I'm supposed to be in. I'm not ever going to fit that. And so again, it's not a bashing. There's an incompleteness, and there are things that are problematic, even for some of them with their theology, that they continue to teach about. I mean, Vodi's written a book about things that are super problematic. And so you're still influencing people. And so there is a need to say, I'm not going to demonize you as a person. You're still made in the image of God. I completely disagree with you, and you have very problematic theology that harms a lot of people.
And be willing to go there. Let's not be so fragile and offended at the notion that John Piper could have done something wrong. Mm-hmm. You know, like we don't need to demonize them. That's not, I feel, for the most part, not any of our goals or people like Lecrea's goals. It's just the freedom. It says a lot. The freedom to be able to tell just their story. Mm-hmm. Our story offends so many people, and therein lies such a big problem.
Yes.
Even tying it into scripture, I think one of my favorite verses or sections of scripture chapters has always been John 9 with the blind man where he spits in the mud and rubs it on his eyes. He has him take that walk. I love that story, but the interactions that he has with people who keep asking him, well, what really happened? No, tell me again, like what really happened? And then his sarcasm that he has is like, what do you want me to say? I already told you. How many times do you want me to tell you what has been happening to me or what happened to me, what my story? And just, that to me, that kind of resonates with me of just that. How many times do I have to say what I've been experiencing or what happened? There's a little bit differences of what kind of things he's experiencing versus being healed by Jesus. But anyway, all right, real quick, let's move into this last topic. And Lecrea helps us segue perfectly into it. I think that this is something I want to hit on, especially with you, Leith, as a resident Georgian, Atlanta resident. You don't like the Georgia nod, but Atlanta.
I live in Atlanta.
Yeah,
I don't live in Georgia.
The Atlanta bubble. Okay, as we talked about, the first lyrics on this album by Lecrea, R.I.P. Breonna Taylor, R.I.P. George Floyd. I ain't trying to hate on my own kind, but Raphael Warnock ain't my only choice, and Herschel either. I love believers. But some of these folks don't rep the kingdom. I'm probably going to lose more shows than money. There we go. But I'm going to mess up y'all's whole agenda. All right, I didn't butcher it too much.
Literally how he opens the album.
That's
okay,
crazy.
So we want to go here a little bit. So Warnock, Herschel, Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, and Herschel Walker are in a current runoff for that Senate seat in Georgia. Leaf shaking her head. Neck and neck, obviously. Raphael Warnock didn't get to that 50% that he needed to win. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over a little bit to Leith, but I'm bringing this up because I'll be honest, I started this podcast as a space to be willing to have conversations like this because I think it's important. This isn't a political podcast. I'm in no way, shape, or form a political expert. Anyway, like I want to stress that I'm not just putting that out there. I'm not, and this is not ever going to turn into a purely political thing, but I'll quote Eugene Cho and say, I think politics matter because policies affect people.
Yes.
And this is very much under that umbrella, and it very much touches on the main pillars of this podcast, how race intersects with and how it affects people, faith, and faith is incredibly involved with some of the things that both of these people have said, especially Herschel Walker and how he brings his Christian beliefs, Christian faith, Christian stances into his platform. It says a lot about us of what we think is going on here. So I think it's important to dissect a little bit with this going on. And also, as I've done even more research and listening, I'd encourage people who maybe are checking out of, well, it's Georgia. Many listeners are from Virginia and other states, not Georgia. This does affect us. The Senate, it's neck and neck. It really does affect all of us, whether we like it or not. So, all right, Alethea, what is going on with these two guys in the Senate race? So maybe some thoughts, but then also some facts of like what is happening.
What is happening is a great question. I have been asking that. What
is happening?
In the heck is going on? Real talk. So I'm just going to say this just from jump real quick. Like, it's embarrassing to live in Georgia right now. That's just how I feel. I've been claiming just Atlanta. I tell people I live in Atlanta. I don't claim Georgia like that unless I have to. But yeah, so just some of the facts. I think I'll start there just quickly. So 2020, or was it last year? Was it last year? Warnock went into a runoff for the Senate seat, one of the Senate seats here in Georgia. Him and John Ossoff both had runoff elections, and they won their runoff. And so I don't understand all the way that terms and all that stuff work in politics and all that. But anyways, his seat is actually up now for a re-election. And so he's got to go through that whole process. And so he's, the incumbent and running to get reelected for his seat. And for the Republican Party, the GOP party, Herschel Walker was who they tabbed. Now, Herschel Walker was living in Texas. So Herschel Walker, for those who don't know sports history, Hall of Fame running back at the University of Georgia, Athens, Georgia, is an hour and a half east of Atlanta. And so Herschel Walker is a household name here in the state of Georgia. And from a sports standpoint, understandable. A phenomenal athlete.
Did he play in the NFL? Was he an NFL player?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah. And so he was living in Texas, though, and the Republican Party here in Georgia needed someone to run against Raphael Warnock. And so they tabbed him to be the person to run against Warnock. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but that's who they chose. And there was initially, when it was even announced that Herschel Walker would be their person, a lot of us were like, but he doesn't even live here. So how is that even possible? So he had to come back to Georgia, or at least have residency here, to be allowed to even run as a candidate for the Senate seat to represent the state of Georgia. And so, it's been kind of neck and neck, kind of early voting, kind of the polls of, Warnock is running on. He's a pastor, and he says he's a pro-choice pastor, so people have beef with that. He's been the reverend at historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is across from the historic Ebenezer Baptist where Dr. King preached, right there on Auburn Avenue in downtown Atlanta. And, people have had, because he's a Democrat. And so we're in a red state. Georgia was flipped blue for Biden in 2020, but Georgia is a red state. And so because the Republican Party deeply wants to flip Georgia back to red, there was all this speculation too in Georgia of there was, voter fraud and, Trump demanding that our Secretary of State find 11,000 votes to overturn the results. And the Secretary of State said he wouldn't. So anyways, there's a lot of heat on Georgia. And so there's this intensity behind, we need to flip. Georgia's a red state. And I can't believe it flipped blue. So Georgia's a red state. So we got to get back to that. And so Herschel Walker, again, I don't know all the ins and outs and reasons why he was chosen, but he was backed by Trump and the candidate to run against Warnock. And so he runs on a platform of very typical party lines for the Republican Party of, quote, tough on crime, of, quote, pro-life, where I don't believe that to be true. But again, it doesn't take much for someone to say they're pro-life and people to believe it. And so running on essentially all the talking points of the Republican Party. And again, I'm not making this up. You can look into that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So these are some of the facts. And so the other layer of that is he's a black man too. So you have two black men running against each other. In the initial seat for Warnock, he was running against Kelly Loeffler, who, white woman, she was part owner of the Atlanta Dream, had to sell her ownership, part of ownership, because of the very reckless racist things that she was saying in 2020. And so it's a whole nother layer now when you have two black men running against each other. So those are a few of the facts. How this has played out, it was wild. So Warnock was in the lead, and we had record numbers here in early voting for Georgia. Georgia was one of the several states where our governor, even though the governor and our Secretary of State said there was no fraud in our voting in 2020. If there's no fraud at all in our election system, why do you pass a voter suppression bill? It's never made sense to me. You don't need to protect our elections if there's never been an issue to protect them. So, but it's a talking point, and it's a point that will get you votes. So that's what happened. And so here in Georgia, SB 202 is a very strict bill around voting here in Georgia. There were certain things, limitations they put on absentee ballots, for example. People have to put their information on the front of an envelope where they took away amount of drop boxes. They took away days that you can vote. Polling stations, most of them were open from 9 to 5. People work from 9 to 5. So you had to find one that would be open from 7 to 7 if you could. There's all these things that were going into place, but Black and brown voters in particular turned out in record numbers in early voting for those 2 weeks that we had it. And so Warnock was in the lead, and then election day comes, and now we're neck and neck. And who's it going to be? Will anyone hit that 50%? And no one did. So that's what, in Georgia, the law is if you don't break the 50% threshold, it goes to a runoff. And then it's just these two. And so December 6th is when the runoff election is here. I shouldn't be surprised, honestly. And I think about the state that I live in. But I think my mind just cannot comprehend the fact that almost 2 million people voted for Herschel Walker. I'm getting to my opinion now, okay, away from facts. If you've listened, if you've been able to stomach listening to Herschel Walker speak in any capacity, it is so hard. One, I'm like, I actually don't understand what the man is saying. It's not logical. It doesn't make sense at all. You can go pull up any place where he has spoken. You're like, what? Like, you didn't even answer the question. And so there's this level of absurdity that he has that people, and at the end of the day, for me, and so many people have seen, is it does not matter what Herschel Walker says. It doesn't matter that his own son is saying he is not fit to be a senator. His own son said, you know what? I'm tired of hiding. I'm not going to cover for him anymore. I'm going to list off all the things that my mom and I have experienced because of this man, and all the things that all the stuff that's continued to come out, all the things that he said he would do prior to him running for his campaign starting, he did not do. His own son is saying, and his own son is Black, very conservative Republican. Okay.
Right. Yeah. That's worth noting. Yeah. Christian Walker. Christian Walker, very important to note. Right. So his own son is saying that. And yet here we have almost 2 million people voting for this man, because what it means is they don't care what he talks about or what he does. They know that they can use him.
Right.
Because the Dems are taking over, and, there's all these crazy things. Right. And again, I'm not saying I co-sign everything that the Democratic Party says and does. There's a lot of reckless things that they do too that I do not agree with. I don't co-sign everything that Raphael Warnock is about, right? Yeah. But again, it's wild to see how it played out here in Georgia, where I think the gap I was reading an article earlier today, the gap for Kemp and Stacey Abrams, the governor race, I think Kemp got like 200,000 more votes or something like that, right? Where it was like much closer 4 years ago. So you would think, okay, 200,000 more people voted for Brian Kemp, but it didn't fully translate into voting for for Herschel Walker. Because had that been the case, Herschel Walker would have won easily. Yeah. And so some people just didn't vote. Some people actually voted for Raphael Warnock that voted for Brian Kemp, which I find very interesting. Oh,
wow. They split the ticket.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So anyways, that's how we get to that point where it didn't translate from one Republican to another with these seats. And so I find that very interesting. But yeah, it feels like Twilight Zone-ish living in Georgia right now, and the fact that we're going to run off here with this. But again, I think to our conversation even a little bit ago about Vodi Bakum, Herschel Walker to an even more intense and troubling degree. And I don't say this lightly. I want to be clear. He is a prop for the Republican Party. He is a Black man who holds very conservative values. So he says, and so they know he's going to just say whatever we say we want him to do. He's going to do it. It's very similar to Candace Owens, right? Like that's a whole nother conversation, but it's very similar. It's there's a lot of clout they get as people who are Black that hold a different view. Not saying that Black people can't disagree and hold different views, right? I'm not saying that at all. But what's very troubling with Herschel Walker is he doesn't even have the cognitive awareness to see like he's just being used, right? Like that's at the end of the day, he's just being used. Like I read an article on Rolling Stone earlier that talked about like the Republican Party doesn't care how wild his public things are, how wild the fact that he went on the one debate he did with Warnock and he pulled out that fake badge where it's been proven that he was never any type of police officer, and yet he's pulling out a prop during a debate, which is illegal. And the moderator told him to put it away. Like he started wearing that in his public outings. So this article was just saying, like, the Republican Party does not care how absurd he sounds. They know if they get him in, he's going to hit the red button, Republican button, on anything that comes through the Senate. That's what they care about. So it's tribalism at play. Okay. Yeah. So, and that's in anything. Okay. Tribalism is across the board, where tribalism is where you are hellbound to your tribe. It does not matter how wild they are, what kind of crazy stuff they do. I'm a Republican. That's what I do. I don't care how wild it is. That's what I've always known. That's what I do. I'm a Democrat. That's what I do. That's what I keep voting. I don't care what y'all say and do. That's what this is boiling down to in a lot of ways, is the party feels like they've lost something, and especially in a state like Georgia. And so what better thing to do than pit two black men against each other in a southern state that has immensely racist roots. And still to this day, Confederate flags are everywhere. I went down to Florida, when was that? Back in October, and we had to make a kind of emergency stop for something. And literally the exit we were getting off, a Confederate flag was flying. So we're talking about a state that has a cotton museum where they talk about cotton as just this commodity and how farmers just harvested it. And I'm like reading about it on this website, like, what? This is the state we're talking about.
Farmers harvested it.
So how wild would it be to pit two black men against each other for the Senate seat? So anyways, I have lots of feelings and thoughts about this. It really does feel embarrassing to live in Georgia and to say, like, wow, almost 2 million of y'all voted for this man who really doesn't stand on any moral ground of what you guys would say that you stand on.
Right.
Well, I don't even think so
it's very contradictory in so many ways. And so it's wild to see that they would rather take the one point of Raphael Warnock saying that he's a pro-choice pastor, because that's what people have said. I can't believe people say they're Christians and they're not going to vote for the reverend, the pastor. And I say, well, there is a point where they're struggling, because they would say, well, he said he's a pro-choice pastor. So
right.
That I'm sticking the single issue stuff, right? I'm sticking to that. So you're going to take that one thing.
Well, okay. So we need to go there a little bit, because you went in on him. I think you didn't even hit the gas all the way, because to me, Herschel Walker is there's overlap, but there's a step further past like a Candace Owens or even like a Trump, because I think that there's manipulation and a lot of things at play there. But I also think there's like a mental capacity that he's being used as such a prop. Like, I think there's a lot of evidence out there. I'm not a doctor, but I've read just a lot of stuff. It seems very apparent, like you said, if you listen to him. I think it's pretty obvious he has CTE.
Yes.
From all his football days.
Yep.
Like, he's not a coherent speaker, not just a coherent politician, like on the stage, like he's nervous or something. Like, he's not a coherent speaker, like in any way. Like, he speaks and it's just objective truth. Like, you don't know what he's talking about. He's not like, there's manipulation to another degree of some stuff he's saying, which I'll say in a second, but he's literally like, he's not competent. He can't do the job.
Yes.
So so it's irresponsible for any party to be okay with that and even can like it and condone it, to be able to use them in that way. But okay, so along the lines of stuff like pro-choice, pro-life, abortion, we don't even need to go down that in the uncomfortable parts of having that discussion, because he's made it so easy to see where he's at. So he's, for people who don't know, he's interview after interview just like pushes the red button, like you said, Leith, and says, I'm pro-life. I'm always going to choose pro-life, 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 pro-life. Abortion's the worst thing. Abortion's murder, all this. Like, no gray area for any kind of discussion. Fine, is what it is. So that'd be one thing, like on its own, if that's where he's standing. But since then, and it seems like more and more coming out, multiple women have continued to come forward and discuss how he has pressured them and encouraged them and literally paid for them to have abortions of aborting babies that he has impregnated them with. And so that's go look it up. Is out there. And so
one of the women is someone who he has another child with too. So it's not just like some rando and they have like actual evidence, like the receipts.
Yes. And so,
so
like,
he has no pro-life ethic. Yeah.
Right. And so that's what I'm saying. So it's not, you don't even have to talk about what do we think about abortion? It's just like, he's a liar.
Yes.
Like about about the main thing that Republicans will get behind. And so it's just the level of lacking coherency and hypocrisy there is just jarring. And I think to me that's the X factor, Leith, of what you're saying. Even I'm assuming why you're saying it's so embarrassing, using your words of just like there's another level. It's like no, it's not that he's and he doesn't. I think he went to one, but he doesn't show up for debates.
Yep.
Raphael Warnock shows up and he literally doesn't show up. It continues. It does the lies about pulling out the badge. Just he's we can say what we want about all politicians, but is unequivocally actually purely lying, and is just not. I mean, the one side of things I'll say you should have sympathy for is like it clearly looks like he's not well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to use all of this to try and win an election against somebody that is well. It just says so many things about where an entire party or people group, whatever, is at. And it's not good for anybody. It's going to hurt us all. The Senate is already very close, and it does matter who gets that based on, I think, the rest of America and rights of how different hoops they'll have to jump through if Herschel Walker does get elected, which is a possibility. To avoid having things, more and more rights taken away from the marginalized. Anyway, I wanted to discuss that a little bit. I appreciate you giving us those facts, Leith, because I think we all have the freedom to think what we want about any of this stuff, absolutely. But the Christian element of pro-life equaling the Christian perspective in this certain, in this specific race, is important to check yourself, I think. And think about what
I
is
think
actually going on.
It continues to highlight the gaps of, to your point about pro-life, how you actually defining pro-life, because a lot of people really aren't pro-life, they're anti-abortion or abortion, and they're two different things. And I think that's where again that's where it even gets faultier, because really Herschel Walker is saying, I'm against abortion in every way, shape, or form. I don't care what the situation is, which is very problematic. But then it's like, but then you've actually participated in the very thing that you're saying that you're against.
Yeah. You've made them happen. Yeah.
And if you're really pro-life, well, your son who is saying we've had to move 6 times in 6 months because we feared for our life.
Yeah. Doesn't track.
Not very pro-life to me. The things you hold up against Raphael Warnock about being divorced and some of the stuff that his wife has shared, which is a problem, right? That Herschel Walker has held a gun to women's heads and threatened their lives. So again, it's so interesting to me to watch, to pick apart those things. But then you get to the point where like, but he doesn't even fit the things that you're picking apart.
Right.
Like that.
It's beyond disagreement.
It's so contradictory. So you can really see at the end of the day that you will use a man who is not well, clearly not well, for your own agenda. You don't care about him. That's at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They don't care about Herschel Walker. They act like they do to serve their own purpose and agenda so that they can try to control the Senate and get the quote, get the Dems out, or all whatever crazy language that's being used right now. And so again, it's really sad. On one hand, it's very sad to see, I think from a human standpoint, of this man can't put sentences together. He's asked a question and he cannot clearly answer them. It's so hard for me to listen to him. Like, I want to be like, what's he even saying? Cause it's just so hard because I can't track. And it's like, he's not okay.
Nope.
And yet he's demonized in so many ways because of how reckless and wild he's been, but he's just being used as this prop for the party to try to gain control of something that they want to control. They don't care about him. They just know Herschel's going to do whatever we want him to do. Yeah. We'll just back him. So Trump will endorse him. We'll give him a bunch of money. We'll back him. We'll quote, support him. I mean, Lindsey Graham was tearful saying how people need to back Herschel Walker. It was actually like, I commented on the post. I said, please make this into a parody because it's comical. He's like in tears saying how the Democrats have dissuaded young or people of color from voting for Herschel Walker when he stands on all these things. And I was like, no, black folks just don't like him. That's what it is. And Lindsey, you barking up the wrong tree, homie. Don't step into waters that you actually don't know. You don't know nothing about the Georgia voters of color here. Don't even do that.
It's nice of him to speak up for the black community.
Yeah, like it was wild. Yeah, it was wild. I was like, this is, please someone make it. I need this SNL skit right now because this is wild. But again, it's like, let me tie this emotion to this deep, like, I'm just so distraught that the Democratic Party is doing this, and it's see how it's affecting Herschel Walker. I'm like, did you listen to what his son said a month ago? Were you moved to tears by that? I don't think you'd be saying what you're saying if you actually listened to that and you saw the pain on Christian Walker when he shared about what it's been like to have Herschel Walker as his dad.
Who, like you
didn't
said,
say anything
is
about that.
prominent black conservative voice.
Yes. So don't do that. Don't try to sit here and say you care about the voters of color in Georgia and how we're being manipulated or whatever you said, when I'm sure you've said nothing publicly about what his son said about him because you guys don't care.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't serve you. And so again, I think here in Georgia, what we're seeing play out is some of the very just deep, evil, messy hypocrisy play out in politics and the way that people are used as some type of token or prop to serve yourself or your own agenda. Yeah. And we're seeing it play out nationally. Sadly. So all eyes on Georgia still until December 6th.
Yes.
So pray for us.
Yeah. Listeners, please educate yourself on what's going on in Georgia. It's not just Georgia.
It's not just Georgia. Yeah, it really is not.
A lot's at stake.
Yeah.
Not talking about joining a party or not a big political statement. It's just a fact. A lot's at stake. Educate yourself. Take some time. Read some stuff. Use the old Google. A lot of information out there.
Check your sources. Just
check your sources.
Check that's true. Yeah, that's very true.
Check your sources. Check us. Stuff we've said. Look it up.
You get into trouble.
Look it up, please. Yeah. All right, Leaf. Yep. We're almost 2 hours in. We gotta let you go. Before you go, switch gears really quick. Who's gonna end up with more wins at the end of the season? Your Hawks or your Cavs?
Oh, okay. Well, I can't say my Cavs because one of my friends who's a diehard Cavs fan would be so devastated that you said that you just tried to put me, because he's he told me before game 1 of their season, he said, Leith, you're either in or you're out, and I need you to make a decision before tip off tonight. And I was like, this is so much pressure. Can I just enjoy basketball? And he's like, no, you need to be in or out. So, he would crumble right now if he heard you say that. So I can't take that on. The Cavs, it's really cool to see just what's happening up there. They got a great squad. Who's going to have more wins, both in the Eastern Conference too. So, man, if everyone stays healthy, this is so hard.
They're both so good.
They're both so good. So, if everyone stays healthy, right? That's a caveat. I think the Cavs will have more wins.
Yeah, I think you're right.
They got a squad, and the addition of Donovan Mitchell within that has been monumental. So Trae Young, I'm sorry, because I'm a Trae Young fan. But I'm cool on Atlanta sports. I want him to do well, but I'm not plant my flag here either. So, I'm a realist. That's what I tell people. So,
I'm a realist
like
too.
The Lakers are trash right now.
Right. Notice I didn't even bring up the Lakers, so I'm a realist as well.
They're trash right now. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
They're not trash. They're not trash. They're playing like trash. So I'll just say that they're more than what they do. They're more than what they do.
I'm comfortable saying that.
But I'll put me on the record. I will say the Cavs.
Okay.
I think it's a good bet this year.
That's locked in. All right. Last thing. How can people follow you and stuff you're doing?
Yep. So you can hit me up on Instagram. I'm no longer on Twitter. I was not active on Twitter before the Elon Musk takeover, but as soon as that came to actually be, I deactivated my account because I just couldn't do it. So I'm only on IG. So Leath14, Leath 14. Find me on the gram. I am a co-host of a podcast myself called the Roll Down Podcast. You can find on Apple and Spotify with my awesome co-host Matthew Melendrez, and we are currently doing some batch recording for season 2. Yep. So our goal is to launch season 2 at the beginning of January. And yeah, we've recorded a few episodes so far, and it's been good. So we're excited. Matthew and I have been through some really, really painful things personally and professionally over the last year and a half. And our season was delayed by a year and a half. We were ready to do season 2 last September, and now we're doing it January of 23. So, check us out on, like I said, Apple and Spotify, the Roll Down Podcast. You can check out season 1 right now, and season 2 is dropping again. The goal is beginning of January. So that's where y'all can find me. And I love conversing with people. So please, hit me up. You can DM me on IG. Yeah. I can engage in conversations with people that I may not agree with. And I think there's beauty in that. So, or if you just want to ask me some questions, please, I'm like I said, I'm open to that, but
yeah,
that's where you can find me. And really appreciate, if you want to listen, check out the Roll Down. We are grateful for everyone who listens, subscribes, downloads, and anything you have thoughts on that too, please hit us up. Yeah. And you can hit us up to the Roll Down Podcast on, Instagram. We have a page there too. So
yeah. Nice. We'll put all that in the show notes, of course. Tag the heck out of y'all. Love the Roll Down. Glad y'all coming back.
We are too.
Man, it's so good. Listeners, for sure, appreciate check that out. Catch up season 1. Sounds like season 2 is coming in 2023. I can't wait. Can't wait for that. Leith, as always, thank you so much. Don't blow up too much and not be able to make time for us.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll always make time.
I got you into the ground level, so we're gonna try and hold on to you as long as we can.
You're in. I'll always make time for y'all. I love being on the pod with y'all.
We're so glad to have you.
I appreciate you. We'll let you go. Listeners, thank you as always for making it all the way to the end of this one. Man, I love this one. This was so good. The music you're listening to is done by our guy, Dylan Dent. Our artwork was created by Ashley Bush. And we'll catch you all next time.
See you.
The nightmare might scare you, no worse than reality. They hunt you by day, R.I.P. Ahmaud Arbery. Everybody got a time, but that's less than comforting. I hope I'm alive by the time they choose to comfort me. Mosquitoes in the vein, or leeches on my soul. This money on my mind is a fracture in my bones. You get crippled by continuing existence like a ghost. And they wonder why we drink, and they wonder why we smoke, and they wonder why we think that everything's a joke. I'm shocked that we can sleep, must be the thought of letting go. Now I lay me down to sleep, I'm better with the valley.